He stepped up to the podium and set the room ablaze. Lumumba of the PLO called out African presidents by name and shocked the world by declaring his full support for Captain Ibrahim Traoré. His speech not only challenged power, it shook its foundations. Today, the problem in Africa is men and women who occupy positions of leadership and influence who are greedy. And do you remember many times when people ask if they are not satisfied? Greed does not ask that question because greed is inscrutable. Greed can never be satisfied. You know that this continent of ours is a great continent in perspective. Think of statistics. I think of how divided we still are. We are the only continent on Earth that is still called Anglophone to say that we speak English, Francophone to say that some of us speak French, Lucophone to say that some of us speak Portuguese, Arabophone to say that some of us speak Arabic, and very soon we will be called Sopon because some of us speak Chinese or Mandarin. The battle in Cameroon is sometimes portrayed as if it were a conflict between English and French speakers. We must exercise the specter of domination, being dominated by others, and that can only come through leadership, and that leadership must come from us. Whether you are in Monrovia, in Liberia, the question I ask you today, what are you going to do in Monrovia? When you are in Dhaka, in Senegal, the home of a great African, Leopold Sedar Senghor, what are you going to do about it? When you are in Gambia, the home of Duda Kaba Jawara, what are you going to do about it? We must provide leadership at all levels, because Asquam Kuruma once said that we can solve our economic and political problems. But the most difficult problem to solve is the problem of our attitude and our mental capacity, because the colonial project was of such a nature that it taught us to hate ourselves. We should no longer hate each other. We should no longer think that films made in Hollywood and Bollywood are the films we should watch. We now need to have films made in Nollywood, in Bongowood, and in Riverwood in Africa. Only then can we be a leader in this sector. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Why are we not leading in this area? How is it that our leadership in the sports sector is being taken from abroad? If you go to rural Kenya, they are betting on whether Sunderland will beat Aston Villa. They are not betting on whether Bola Babes will beat Afia Gwinak, the home of Ahmed Say. And yet, sports is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I say that leadership should be at that level in sports. What about our music? Why should it be? And I am not saying that they are not good singers. Why does it have to be Shakira? Why does it have to be Celine Dion? Why not Baraka? Why not Banner Boy? Why not harmonize? When it comes to our books, who is reading economics? Are you reading Ando from Zambia? Are you reading Sman? Are you reading Chim, and who is reading? Because leadership is at all levels. Today, our continent is in a midlife crisis, and we are seeing a lot of conflicts in Sudan, in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, in the Tigray and Hamara region of Ethiopia, in the northern Mozambique and Cameroon. We are seeing these conflicts happening in Mozambique. They are on the streets because one of our problems is that we do not trust each other. Even when we are called to participate in an election, we cannot print our own ballot papers. And when we are called to count 8 million votes in Kenya, we cannot count them. And the United States of America counts 80 million votes in a single night. In Kenya, we cannot count 8 for 2 weeks. And even when we count, we do not trust our count. Leadership is about trust, vigilance, and verification. You cannot lead when there is not a modicum of trust in the things that we do. Have you ever wondered why we print our ballots outside the continent? Have you ever wondered why we print our money outside the continent? Have you ever wondered why we print our national IDs outside the continent? Have you ever wondered why we print our passports outside the continent of 1.4 billion people? We need to trust ourselves. And Ezekiel, I completely agree with you. We all have a responsibility. All of us. Those of you who are Catholics here, how many Catholics are present in the assembly? Even if you are not Catholic, I want you to read A Great Catholic, a Great Christian, Martin Luther. He was the only one. And those of you who are Pentecostal evangelicals must know, but for Martin Luther, there was no Reformation in the church. So one day, after much reflection, on October 31st, 1517, he posted the 95th thesis in the Church of Wittenberg and said, among other things, The time to speak the truth is not a favorable time. To speak the truth is not a favorable time. It must be said at all times, the consequences. Nevertheless, he was executed. Martin Luther. And that's how the church was translated into all the languages that we have today. Leadership is about knowledge, as you rightly said, and for those of us who are Muslims, because we must be aware of these differences. I want you to read the history of Islam, and there are 4 caliphs in the early days of Islam: Omar, Abu Bakr, and Uman, and the 4th of them was Ali, under whom the division between Sunni and Shia came. Ali was supposed to be the first caliph, but, he said, "For the sake of Islam, I leave that to Abu Bakr and ultimately to Omar." A good leader must be able to surrender for the greater good. If he does not surrender and is not prepared to surrender for the greater good, why should we stroke your ego? Oh, then he is not a leader. He is a megalomaniac. And many Africa has no shortage of megalomaniacs who suffer from the Jehovah's complex. They believe that they are God's gift to their country, and he may have a Jehovah's complex as a hotel manager. He may have a Jehovah's complex in his own office where nobody questions him. A good leader must be questioned, because nobody knows everything. I don't know how many of you have seen the film Gandhi, Mahatma, and there are 2 leaders, Jawaharlal, who is a Hindu, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who is a Muslim, and there is the Mahatma, who is considered the leader, the moral leader, who could, if he had wanted to, have been the Prime Minister of India, and he is the leader of... That's what he does. I used to call him Pandi G, short or end of term, for Pandit Jawad, Pandi G. I want him to step down for Jinnah, so that Jinnah can be the first Prime Minister of India, and all the heads of departments should be Muslims. And that's what Pandit says. Gandhi Ji, I accept. But people are out there because there is animosity. And that's what Jinnah says. It's either independent India, or independent Pakistan, or a civil war. The rest is history. Do you know what happened between 1947 and 1948? Izakio leadership is not about titles. Everyone was there. And Mimu says that as they were leaving, he made some of the leaders say, "Thank God, Africa is not united. I would have ceased to be president." After the independence of Ghana, Near said again that Kwame wanted us to unite. Some of us wanted it to be gradual. He was right. He was right because we did not unite at the right time. They don't care at all. They only care about our Africanness. Today, when I hear my good friend Yera Museveni talk about this, I agree. In 1986, he was saying these things and he is starting to say them again. The spirit has come back. Yes. But like all good answers, he must choose when to give up. Good leader must also know how to mentor and when to step down so that others can grow. When you are a good leader, you must start stepping down and others must start growing because there is no reward for a leader than producing a student who surpasses you. And you will not succeed until your successor succeeds. The issue of leadership, particularly how political leadership has kept Africa at the lowest levels of human development, through slavery, having been humiliated by colonization, so we decided that we should regain our independence, and this was not limited to the African continent. The spirit of liberation was evident throughout the African diaspora. Just read about the lives of Africans in the Caribbean, like Sylvester Williams, who are the founders of Pan Africanism in the 19th century. Some say even in the 20th century. One only has to listen to the early thoughts of people like Marcus Mosiah, Gave to appreciate what leadership was all about. One only has to listen to great Pan-Africans like W.B. Du Bois, who died as Ghanaians know and was buried in Ghana. One only has to listen to John Henry Clark to know that the desire for liberation through moral leadership was alive and well within the continent and beyond. One only has to listen to that famous speech by Martin Luther King Jr. in August 1963, the I Have a Dream speech. Many do not know that Martin Luther did not actually say he had a dream until a famous American singer in the audience raised her voice. The woman was Mahalia Jackson, and she said to him, "Martin, tell them about the dream you had." It was then that he finished his written speech and began to speak about the dream he had. Martin Luther King Jr. did not hold any public office. He was a moral leader, and the world remembers him today because he stood for something and was prepared to die for it. We must be prepared to die for what we believe in. And I also thought about many things this morning. And I thought about the great Kwame Nkrumah and how, back in early 1945 in Manchester, in the United States of America, when he participated in the Pan African meeting, the idea of liberation came to him, and when he returned to Ghana, which was then the Gold Coast, Africa would never be the same again. And you will remember that before he was admitted to Lincoln University in the United States of America, where he would meet with the Enam of Nigeria, when he was asked to write his personal statement, this is what he said: "So much to be done. So little time. So much to be done. So little time." And in 1958, in Accra, Ghana, he called all Africans of goodwill to Accra. There was no internet. There was no social media. But they gathered there, and the spirit of change began, and he did not restrict it to politicians. Osagia for himself. He wanted all Africans to get involved in changing the African continent economically, socially, culturally, and in other ways. And he did not stop there. In 1961, he was present in Casablanca, Morocco, with the king, a son of Morocco, talking about Africa and about leadership, because he recognized that there is nothing as important as leadership, and he did not stop there. In 1963, between May 22nd and 25, under the auspices of Ethiopia, a meeting was held with 32 heads of state and government in Africa, and liberation movements gathered in artists. Many do not know that at that time Addis Ababa would never be the headquarters of the African Union. The Osagia of Nkrumah wanted it to be in Accra, and Gamal Abdel Nasser, of the United Arab Republic, now called Egypt, wanted it to be in Cairo, and so it was said that Addis should be a temporary headquarters, awaiting a resolution. Is it Ara or Cairo? And of course Addis remained the headquarters. Why was that meeting important in 1963? It was important because all the politicians of the time loved Africa. All of them, without exception. I read and reread the 32 speeches. I read and reread them. Even those who became monsters later spoke sensibly. Remember the speech by David Doe, from what is now the Central African Republic, saying in part, I'm happy to be part of this meeting because it is only in unity that we can make Africa great. Remember the speech by Julius Kamara of Tanzania saying, we have not come here to remind ourselves of unity. Unity is what will make Africa great. But the most iconic speech of all was undoubtedly that of Osagia Fuameas, delivered on May 25, 1963, with a sense of urgency. He told Africans, let us unite now. Let us leave here with a single currency, as a decision that we have made. Let us leave here having agreed that we will have a single army. Let us leave here having agreed that we will have a single foreign policy, and I am suggesting that we actually form a committee of ministers to work out these decisions, and I am suggesting that we even choose the capital of Africa. I don't know what others think he said, but I suggest that he should be in Leopoldville, which is now Kinshasa. We didn't listen to him, and we ended up with the African Unity Organization, or the AU leadership. A year later, the African leaders met again, invited by Gamal Abdel Nasser in Cairo, and Osag thought there would be unity that day. That never happened. A year later, in 1965, there was another meeting in Accra, Ghana. People never talk about it. They never talk about it because a year later, Osag was overthrown during an official visit to Hanoi, Vietnam, via Ping, China, by a king now called Peking. We say this because we are gathered here as Africans, and we are talking about leadership. Ghana and the Moa of Togo speak French, and the Ghanaian mob speaks English, and BMO, in fact the Ghanaian mob is called BMO, British Mobers. That's how we are divided. Many of you here from different countries will remember that leadership was at the heart of it, in a prison, and he says that even if the history of Congo will not be written by him, it will be written by Congolese. Patrice Emery Lumumba was only 35 or 36 years old at the time. Leadership, you will find your courage. Poverty, disease, and bad politics have haunted us for a long time. Chinua writes about Nigeria, but it could just as well be about Africa. the problem of Nigeria, and I dare say that Africa is simply a question of leadership. Until the day we solve this problem, our host country, our universities, our industries will never be what we want them to be. It is an urgent matter. Those of you from Zimbabwe will remember the many words of Robert Gabriel Mugabe before he came to power. He was as clear as can be about African dignity. You cannot be a leader without dignity. Dignity is the mother's milk of true leadership. Those of you from Mozambique will want to know that the name of your country, Mozambique, comes from an Arab called Ibn Bik. That is how Mozambique got its name, the home of Samora Mos Machel. And I want you to read about the leadership not just of Samora, but of Edwarden, and how they died for what is good and right. Leadership at all levels is what will change the African continent. I am focusing on these individuals because, as Hindu philosophy says, when the politics of a country stumbles, everything falls apart. No matter how well-intentioned you are, if one stopped me, we created tyrants because we did not stop them. It is our duty to raise our voices all the time. You know, there is a book I recommend to you, written by Henrik Gibson, an enemy of the people. He says that he who speaks the truth is bound to be unpopular, and even when the masses come to him, he is still unpopular. They remain unpopular, and he ends by saying that the strongest man or woman in the world is the one who stands alone for the truth. There are men of God here. You know my views on Christ are sometimes controversial. Some even say blasphemies. But I ask critical questions. I was once asked if I had lived in the days of Jesus, which of the disciples do I think I would have been? And I said it would have been Thomas without a doubt. I would have asked Christ, "Oh, I want to see." I would have been Philip. I would have asked Christ, "We have seen him for many years, but now we want to see the Father." I would have asked why I was not the only one asking such a question. John the Baptist himself, who baptized Christ the day before his death, while he was in prison, sent 2 disciples to Christ to ask, "Christ, are you the only one, or should we wait for another?" He tells you, the blind see, the deaf hear, the lepers are healed, and the gospel is being preached throughout the world. And then John dies. A good leader must doubt, because it is by doubting that one is confirmed, and it is by doubting that one has the scientific approach to issues. If you do not doubt, you are not a leader. Those who have a monopoly on wisdom and knowledge often lead their countries down shortcuts to chaos. Mashasma Biogo. He was overthrown in 1979 by his cousin, I believe nephew, who is the current leader of Equatorial Guinea. And when he was leader, he thought he was God's gift to the world. When the news was about to be broadcast on television, he would emerge, his image would emerge from the clouds, and everyone would say, "Mira, the one miracle." Selfish, because it's all in vain. If you want to lead without excuses, you must have no burdens. The leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats as he said, "Africa's enemies are not just out there. They sit in leather chairs, fly private jets, and give up our future for short-term praise." The hall fell silent. No one dared interrupt. The toxicity of politics is alive and well. Everyone dies. If you doubt me, go to her grave now if you can. Those of you who are from l'Ivoire, and you will remember l'Ivoire in the early days of Félix Houphouët-Boigny, although a Francophile, he was proud, and if you want to meet proud people on earth, meet the Codiarians. They love their country, and they go to Abidjan or Grand Bassam and you see pride. Pride is not a bad thing if it is not something that leads to arrogance, because pride is the mother of excellence. When you are proud, you want to do things well. Those of you who are from Mali, many of you who are from Mali do not remember that a great man once lived there, Modibo Keïta and the Osagia of Kwamaruma formed a union that did not go very far, but Remir Lumumba was prepared to be part of that union. Leadership, selfless leadership. Those of you who are from Namibia, and there are 2 great politicians who came from that land of Namibia. One of them didn't even go very far. But those of you who are from Namibia, and those of you who are Africans, I want you to read the life not of Samnu but of Andama Ham Tayivo. These were great men. And what they said is that in order to serve the African continent, We must be dedicated to it. Those of you from Lutu, the island kingdom, the home of my friend King Lay. Look what happened. You may have had your problems, but leadership is about dedication and cultural awareness. I mention Lutu because part of the African problem is that, culturally, we have been decimated. We have a saying that goes, abandon your culture and become a slave. If Africa is to realize our potential, the positive aspects of our culture must be taken into account. Its place of honor. Those of you who are from Nigeria, I have said this countless times when I am in Nigeria, whether in Nasarawa, Kaduna, Anambra or Bayelsa, I keep saying that the day Nigeria gets it right, that is the day Africa wakes up. Just read the history of the early years of Nigeria, during the days of the great Zeke of Africa. Many of you do not know that Nami Azikiwe was called the Great Zeke of Africa because he loved the continent just like Abu Bakr. And you Nigerians may not know that in 1970 the King of Saudi Arabia was sick and went to Ibadah Hospital for treatment. Today we are going to London and Dubai because of lack of leadership. But I want them to travel the world. Some of the best doctors in the world, in the United States, Europe, and America, are Nigerians, Liberians, Ghanaians, and Kenyans. You go to Columbus, Ohio, where there are no less than 65,000 Liberians, and there is a consulate in Columbus, Ohio. Liberia, Monrovia, that country that has become the pilgrimage site of Africans. What leadership did we have there? One could go on and on and on. Benin, the birthplace of Hubert Maga. Tanzania, I've already mentioned, the birthplace of Julius Kambarage, that great man. Zambia, the birthplace of Kenneth David. Leadership. When he died. Julius Nyerere when he left office. You know they searched for bank accounts for them all over the world. Kaunda, they said he had only the equivalent of $8,000 after 24 years in power. Honestly, Carragher, those of you from Tanzania will know he had a modest house in Butiama and his own army that improved it. Look at our current political leaders. The day before yesterday I was asked, what is the dominant system of government in Africa? And I said, it is a kleptocracy, kakistocracy. And I had to expose it. I tell you that kakistocracy is a government led by the worst of the worst, and kleptocracy is a government led by thieves like Mubu and Zambang. It's about leadership at all levels. You know, I go to Rwanda often, and I remember Rwanda in 1993. And I remember that for 100 days the world was silent while the genocide was happening. The optimists wrote the obituary of Rwanda saying they are dead. They will never rise again. But through leadership, I want them to go to Kigali now. See the order. Order. Don't be fooled in Nairobi by the expressway. It looks clean. Go under it and you will see the dirt. In Rwanda, when you run from hill to hill, there is a space for pedestrians. Even the borders, or the Okadas of Nigeria, are controlled in Kenya, Uganda, and Mali. They carry 3 people and sometimes dogs across a border. Again, this is leadership. It is possible. No excuses. That's what we are saying. We have been making excuses for a long time. We said we were colonized. We were not the only ones who were colonized. Do you know the Arabs have a saying that when Pharaoh was asked why he became a tyrant, Pharaoh said, because no.